New season, new cars, and a brand new YouTube channel. My name is Sam, and welcome to Behind the Barrier, a fan-led YouTube channel where it's dedicated to all things Australian supercar racing. Throughout the year, you can expect event previews, reviews, and loads of other supercars discussion content in between. And today, I'm kicking off my official season preview by taking a look at the 2023 Repco Australia Supercars calendar, giving you my honest thoughts and opinion on what we've got lined up in terms of events. So before any wheels are turned in anger, we of course have testing, and this isn't something I normally pay all that much attention to, but with the arrival of Gen 3 machinery, I am very excited for the dates that you can see on screen. So testing will start off with some shakedowns, and it's actually split across two different racetracks, Winton for the Victorian teams and Ipswich for the Queensland teams. They're going to take place on the 24th and 30th of January. They're going to be fairly limited in terms of running, obviously just being a shakedown to make sure the cars are working okay. Things are going to pick up for split testing on the 7th and 9th of Feb though, where the teams are going to have far more time to really stretch the limits of their cars, and of course the drivers get an opportunity to see how they handle. That's a bit of a preview to the single all-in test day, the one we're all looking forward to, I think, on the 22nd of February. All the teams are going to descend on Sydney Motorsport Park, and we might start getting a bit of an idea on where they all stack up. In terms of two quick thoughts on the testing schedule, the first one is, are all the teams going to be ready? Gen 3 is coming in hot, to say the least, and a lot of teams are a little concerned if they're going to have all their cars ready in time. If not, I imagine we'll just see some driver sharing, like Formula 1 do, where they only run a single car during testing. The other note is that I believe all the shakedown and testing events are open to the fans, so if you're nearby any of these circuits, it might be worth checking out how you can get yourself trackside. I'm based in Perth, so I can't exactly drop into testing or shakedown, so I'm very jealous of anyone that does get to see these cars nice and early. But enough about testing. When does the racing start? Well, the answer to that is the 10th to the 12th of March, where the season will kick off properly at the Newcastle 500. Very excited to have that event back on the calendar. A few weeks later, supercars are off to Melbourne to support the Grand Prix on the recently revised Albert Park layout, and then they're going to cross the Nullarbor all the way over to my part of the world in Perth at the recently renamed Carco Raceway, as Barbagallo, as most of you probably know it. And then they are bouncing once again across the country to Tasmania for the wonderful bull ring that is Symmons Plains. And then as winter kicks in around June and July, we're heading north, first to Darwin and then Townsville for some warmer weather. Then the team head back down the coast around July 28 to 30. They're going to Sydney for the only night event of the year at Sydney Motorsport Park. And then that's followed by a trip to South Australia with the OTR Super Sprints at the Bend. Then endurance season kicks off with the return of Sandown as an endurance race at the Penrite Isle Sandown 500. Then of course the big one, first weekend of October, we've got the Bathurst 1000. And then we're going to wrap up the season with two brutal street circuits in the Gold Coast and of course Adelaide, which recently returned. In terms of my personal most anticipated events, I'm really excited for the opening trio of races. I think they're going to put Gen 3 machinery to the test on three very different types of racetrack. Obviously starting off with Newcastle, that's a very slow speed, tight and technical racetrack. Then we're flipping things on their head with the Grand Prix, which despite being a street circuit is designed for Formula 1, so it's actually very fast and flowing for a supercar. And then of course we go from the street circuits to an old school traditional racetrack in Perth. Once again, completely different type of circuit. I think the combination of these three right out of the gate are really going to give us a nice early look at just how the Gen 3 behaves in a load of different environments. The endurance rounds are of course the next thing I'm really anticipating. Sandown returns as an endurance race, which I think is fantastic. The track really works well in the endurance format, but of course it's also an opportunity for the teams to really test the durability of their Gen 3 machinery before the big one, of course the Repco Bathurst 1000. This one speaks for itself in terms of excitement, but I'm even more hyped this year because I'm looking forward to seeing Gen 3 machinery flying over the top of the mountain for the very first time. It's not all sunshine and race cars though. There are two events I feel a bit nervous about for two very different reasons. The first one is the Townsville 500. Now, I love this racetrack. I really love this event, but I'm a little bit concerned because I feel like, especially last year, it felt like the grandstands had reduced, the corporate tents had dropped. It just feels like the event's been petering out. Obviously, COVID, I'm sure, has played a big role in that, but I'm really hoping in 2023 we see that event spring back to life and back to its full glory and atmosphere. Sadly, I can't say the same about the second track I've highlighted here, which is The Bend. I really struggle to connect with this place. I like a few things about it, the really wide run into turn 1, for example, and the really fast sort of multi-apex turkey-esque corner halfway through the lap. They're both really cool, but other than that, I just struggle to get excited for this event. I think it's because there's no sort of real atmosphere. I think the fans are spread out over such a large area, and there's no real landmarks off in the distance. It really does feel like you're in the middle of a field. But here's hoping Gen 3 changes my mind about the circuit. Look, it looks immaculate, it looks fun to drive, looks like a really well-run facility, but I'm just hoping the event spurs a bit more excitement, for me at least, in 2023. So let's finish up looking at the bigger picture. What are the wins with the 2023 Repco Supercars schedule? Well, the first one to point out is that it's the first calendar we've had since COVID that I think's been released with a bit of confidence. There's no asterisks next to any of these events. Everything should pan out with no sort of question marks over how things are going to play out, which I think is a really promising sign and a return to the norm. Obviously, with COVID going away, it also means some street circuits are coming back, with things like Newcastle and Adelaide coming back last year. That's balancing out the street circuits against the permanent circuits, and I personally really enjoy that variety in supercars. And of course, as highlighted earlier, Sandown returns as an endurance event, which I think once again is a really big win for the fans. It's not all great though. Obviously, there's a few losses that come with the 2023 schedule. The biggest one, the most heartbreaking one, is no New Zealand. I think this is a huge shame. Obviously, there's a huge amount of fans in New Zealand. They have some amazing racetracks and some even more amazing drivers. So it's a bit of a travesty that we're not going there. I think it is the victim of circumstance. I've seen a lot of anger towards supercars about no New Zealand, but honestly, I feel like they just got caught out with such a late announcement that Pukekohe was closing. Obviously, as just a fan, I don't know how these negotiations pan out, but the fact the 2023 schedule was delayed from being announced for quite some time suggests to me supercars really tried to secure an alternative, but just couldn't get it over the line for 2023. I would like to highlight this quote from Supercars CEO Shane Howard though, who said in late 2022 that we have every intention to return to New Zealand and we are confident of an announcement in the new year regarding a partnership with a new venue. So hopefully that means we're going to hear that New Zealand is coming back in 2024, long before the full 24 calendar is even announced. Hopefully in the coming months there will be a confirmed venue and a confirmed return to New Zealand in 24. There are a few other L's. I think less night racing is a bit of a loss. I really enjoyed night racing in Perth. I think night racing works really well for tracks like Perth and the Bend, for example, where there's not so much scenery off in the distance. I think night racing really sort of spices it up visually, especially for TV viewers. And of course, we do have a slight reduction in rounds. I suspect this is also as a result of New Zealand being lost. We're going from 13 rounds held in 2022 down to 12 for 2023. But overall, what do I think of the final calendar? I would describe it as solid. I think it's sort of the bare minimum supercars could have presented us. I think anything less would have been a little bit frustrating and potentially a bit disappointing. It's a very safe schedule, but even then, it's missing quite a few key locations. We've discussed New Zealand. Winton has also been taken off the schedule. That seems like a big shame, given that it should have been a fairly easy shoe-in for New Zealand being lost. And of course, there's some other great racetracks out there, like Phillip Island, which I really hoped we'd see Gen 3 kicking around, but sadly that won't be the case. But look, even with a few missing events, the national presence has been retained. Supercars are going to visit every state in Australia, barring the ACT, and I think that's really important. There was a question mark over Perth and Tasmania for a little bit late last year, but fortunately Supercars will be doing the national tour, and hopefully we have New Zealand back on the calendar very soon. But regardless of where we go, the biggest factor, the biggest talking point in 2023 is going to be Gen 3 itself. We've got the brand new cars coming, Camaro versus Mustang. I am super excited for this one. I'm going to admit out of the gate, I was a Holden supporter, so I'm de facto going to be a GM supporter and back the Camaros, but Above all else, I'm just a fan of good hard racing, so I'm really excited with what Gen 3 offers. That's going to be the thing we look at in my next video. I'm not too much of a technical person when it comes to the inner workings of these race cars, but I do want to discuss Gen 3 in a bit more detail. So be sure to subscribe if you want to see that video. Following that, we'll take a look at each individual team and the driver lineup. But for now, thank you for checking out this first video here on the channel. I'd love to know your thoughts on the 2023 season. I've shared my pros and cons, and now it's time for you to let me know your thoughts down below. But until then, be sure to subscribe for more videos, treat people like your trackside in the comments, be kind to everybody, and I'll see you in the next video very soon.